This is a video about virtual puzzling with fragmented objects. So in the case that you have a 3D scan or multiple 3D scans of an object that is in fragments, and you want to put it back together virtually in order to make a visualization of how the whole object once looked like, these are techniques that you can use in Blender. So from these fragments we go to a object put together like this. So how do you approach a problem like this? Well, first you have to familiarize yourself with the Blender navigation and the object rotation and transformation tools. When you understand how these work and how to work in 3 dimensions with rotation, you will more easily and more accurately be able to place objects on exactly the location that you want to. So as you can see, Blender has this so-called gimbal over there, which represent the axes in Blender, and you can use them conveniently to change your viewing position. So often when you're placing things accurately, you will have to switch between different orthographic views. These are orthographic views. You see also a grid at the background. There are side views, bottom views, top views, like directly from above or the side. And these are very important to help you place things accurately. So this is an important thing to start with, that you know. The second thing is, whenever you start rotating objects, the point of rotation has to be set at a convenient point. So these objects, being imported from 3D modeling software, have a rotation point that is not convenient. So when I start rotating the body of the face, it rotates like so. When I start rotating this fragment, it rotates like so. I do not want to rotate it around some kind of imaginary center point far away outside the object. I want to rotate it around its own center point. So when you have imported this object from 3D modeling software or 3D scanning software, chances are the pivot point, its origin, the object origin, is not on a convenient location. So to resolve this, select all of the objects, right click, set origin to center of mass. Now each of the object has a origin and a rotation point at a more convenient location, namely the center of the object. So it rotates around its own central axis. So this is a very important thing to start out with. So the first thing that you should do is organize the fragments that you have and get a sort of a grouping of where they should belong. So we start with the large object, and I rotate this object in a way that it makes sense to me. So I want to place it with its foot on the bottom of the scene. So this is basically the 0.00 point in Blender. I want to make sure that it also from the other side is. So now you already notice that some of the objects are in the way, so I can just, for the time being, I will just move them out of the way, and also this object and this object, I move them out of the way. So, all right. We have now placed this object correctly straight up the way it should be placed. Now we can start looking at all the other fragments. So what do we have here? It's part of the neck and the rim of this object, of this Lakitos. And so we can just, I hit G to quickly move it aside. Placement doesn't have to be accurate now. I'm just gonna make a grouping. So this is also clearly part of the rim. So I'm gonna put it also together with that. And that is part, so it's as a whole. So this is part of the neck of the object. So roughly here. Then I have here that seems to be part of the handle. So this is all handle. This is also a handle part. So these objects, fragments, belong to the handle. And then I have another rim fragment. And what do we have over here? Another rim fragment. And this is possibly also another rim fragment. As you can see, while I am moving in 3D space, while not confining to an axis, the object move a little bit randomly. So this one has been placed like further away. So I just go in a top view to kind of move it closer to its group. So we have now a couple of groups. So we have these belong to the rim. This is the neck, and this is the handle. So first thing that we should start placing is, in this case, the neck. And as you can see, it has this fracture area that looks like that, and that is kind of similar to what we have here. So what we do first is just to move it in general position. This is the strategy all the time. So I hit G to move it, and now I'm gonna rotate it to roughly get into position. Hit G again, rotate with R. So this is clearly not the right rotation. So I move it, and also we're not in the right place location. So I hit G again. And now I'm gonna look at it from the top, if I can see it better here. No, it's not convenient. So I can see that this area over here should probably go in here, and this area over here should probably go in here. So what I will do now is rotate it on the Z-axis a little bit, like so, RZ. Rotate it a little bit more on the Z-axis, and now I move it down G, G, Z. Okay, so this should match with there, so I can, well, there are various ways to do this. I can move it a little bit on the Y-axis, and then G and the Z-axis. G, Y. If you find this a little bit difficult to use the keyboard G and then the axis of movement, you can also use the move tool in Blender. So that makes it perhaps a little bit more intuitive. But I'm kind of used to using the keyboard. So in that case, you would have to switch between move tool and rotation tool. It's an alternative way of doing it. So we have some gaps still here, and we move a little bit closer to here. So now we're gonna do the sort of the detailed placement. So we move this. I simply hit G and get it roughly on the right location. So now I have this location more or less aligned. However, this is still not aligned very well. While when I'm starting to rotate now to get it on a better alignment with the bottom, you will see that this moves out of alignment. So what we ideally would want now is to move the rotation point to this area on the object. And there's a very easy way to do that. So first, we need to place the 3D cursor. The 3D cursor is used for this. So the 3D cursor is placed by holding Shift and then right mouse button on that point that you want to use as a pivot point in rotation. And you will see that the 3D cursor automatically sticks to the surface that you are clicking on. So it is Shift, right click. You can also use, again, a tool here in the toolbar. But I think that is a bit confusing because sometimes you forget that you have that turned on, and then you expect to select something and then you don't select anything. So just leave selection tool on and Shift right click. So now we have to tell Blender, do not use the origin of this object to rotate around, but use the 3D cursor. So here is the transform pivot point menu, and this is where you can select what Blender should use to transform, do any kind of transformation. So it's not only for the rotation, but also for scaling and movement. But in this case, it is most important for rotation. So we select 3D cursor. And now when I start rotating from this view, you see that the 3D cursor is used as a point of rotation, exactly what we wanted. So now we can start moving it around. So we have a gap here. So I think that we are lacking some pieces that may have been lost. So we won't get a perfect fit. And some of the details of the fracture surfaces are probably not very precisely scanned. I mean, this is a limitation of the 3D scanner that was used. Anyway, we can get a somewhat more accurate placement probably, so we can rotate a little bit more. So as you can see, I'm now just rotating and moving from my viewing position. So I'm trying to move my viewing position to a location that is perpendicular to the rotation that I want, or and then I start to rotate. So we can look it up from the top to see if it is more or less okay. So yeah, we can decide to kind of move it around a little bit, but it seemed like that our fitting is alright. You can also use the texture, so the color, to see if it matches. Yeah, so I think a much better match we can't get. So the next thing that we want to fit together is what we put on top of this, the neck, the remainder of the neck and the rim. However, the rim is in pieces, so what I recommend is first put together the pieces of the rim and then all together put it on top of the other half of the neck. So this is the base piece. Again, I'm going to go in one of the side views. Make sure that this is rotated properly. Okay, now I see that I'm still using the 3D cursor as the point of rotation, the pivot point. So we switch this back to its median point, which is basically this point. And I hit rotate. And now I'm using the lines of the grid to kind of get alignment correct. So now I have, from this perspective, I have it correct. So now I switch to the Y perspective. And yeah. All right, so now we have this base fragment oriented correct way, straightened. We can start to add the other fragment. So this is the second largest fragment. So I will move it roughly into position, rotate it roughly into position, G, switch to a different view. Okay, we clearly have to rotate it around its Z-axis, so we hit go in top view and rotate it. So now the object is a little bit in our view, so we move it a little bit to the side so we can have some we can focus on the rim. Alright, so we can see that this fracture should fit into that fracture surface. So we can start to move it here. And now again, so this should line up with that, and that should line up with that. So when I start rotating, the rotation is from the center point of the object. We don't want it, we want to rotate again from the 3D cursor. So I do shift right click, 3D cursor, rotate. Alright, now I'm gonna look at it from the side, from another side. So it seems to line up pretty well. Is it also at the bottom? Decent. Okay, and then we have other objects to align. So we have this fragment. So I'm just starting now with this fragment. G, move it around. Rotate. Oh, we're rotating again around to. So you have to switch between 3D cursor and median point all the time. So move it into position here, more or less. Here, more or less. And now rotate it. Rotate it. And now from the top, rotate it. Yeah, so you can see that this clearly should fit with that fracture surface. So I'm just going to move it into position like this, put the 3D cursor here again, and now use the 3D cursor to further align this fragment. So it goes a little bit inside, so there. Oh yeah, as you can see, there's some issue here, so I'm now looking at from the Y direction. No, something like this. Oh yeah, so as you can see, it's sloping downwards a little bit, while the top of the rim should be kind of straight and flat. So what I'm doing now is to just rotate it from this view. Yeah, make sure that it is on the same level. Yeah, we could move it a little bit closer. So GY, GX. Is this still correct? Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Okay. Let's just give it a try. We can always later improve the alignment. So this is a bit of a difficult fragment. So now we get this fragment. Again, move it roughly into position by changing the viewing angle, and then start switch to median point as pivot point, rotate. Okay, so rotate G, okay, so we use, make sure that this first aligns. Put the 3D cursor there. Rotate X, Y. Yeah, okay, just rotate from this angle. Rotate around the Z axis. So it's sloping down while it shouldn't. So from this position I rotate it a little bit more upwards. That is sort of decent. We're nearly there. There's a little bit of a deviation over here. So what we can do now is to, because this should be more or less a circle, but if we think like these three are roughly correct, we can select all of them and use this as the transform pivot point and start to rotate this around the Z. Clearly that doesn't help us much. So what we could do is select this one and this one, put the 3D cursor there, rotate around the Z to get a little bit more inward curving. Okay, yeah. Now we should move this to fit with that. And now we could rotate these two a little bit better to align with that one, and now rotate this one. So it's just fiddling until you have it right. This more or less looks alright. So we can check it from different angles. You see that it is flat at the top. Yeah. And then there's this piece remaining. So where does this go? Well, we have one gap over here, so I guess it should go there. So we have this piece, move it to the gap, change viewing angle, like so. And now we have to rotate it into position. So I will just rotate around its median point, something like that. Okay. Rotate it. Okay, so I think this should go over here, or maybe it should, maybe it's reversed. Let's rotate it like so, and now rotate around the Z. Yes, probably this is it. Okay, so a little bit more accurate placement by GY, GX, GY, GX. Okay, now this is this corner aligned, so we now move the 3D cursor to there, set it and transform pivot point to the 3D cursor, and well, it already seems to rotate. Yeah, so move it a little bit more. See how this looks from the top. Yeah, so you can also switch to the shading mode, and then, for instance, use a matte cap shading in order to look at surface details. GY, GX, GZ. As I said, there are probably parts missing. I know that there are parts missing from this object. Rotate, set. These were too small to really scan, so they were never included. Rotate. Yeah. Okay. Switch back to texture visualization. Yeah, and now finally we've finished this part. So we now want to place the rim on top of the neck. So we select all of them, move these out of the way, move it roughly into position. And then all of them should go to median point, rotate around the z-axis to find the right rotation, something like this. Okay, this G. G. Again, here we can use the 3D cursor. So probably, wait a sec, this goes maybe here. And then use the 3D cursor to rotate the entire thing like so. Yes. Okay, something like that. Alright, so this video has been long enough. I'm not going to demonstrate refitting of the remainder pieces of the handle. You can do this yourself. So when you're finished, you have something like this. A reconstruction of the object that was scanned in fragments and virtually reassembled. You can use this as a basis to do further modeling or object reconstruction. Create fills for areas that are lost, or to do some reconstruction of the original paintwork on this face, or just as a way to visualize the object, how it should look like when the fragments are put together, for example as a preparational step for a real restoration.